My name's Christine Steib. We live in Ohio in the United States. My daughter has seizures. She's 18 years old now. She's had seizures since she was an infant. She started having seizures when she was about 5 weeks old. And although I had never seen a seizure before, and what she did was not something completely unusual, I just knew right away that that seemed like a seizure. So I was very concerned right away. But it was quite some time before anybody else really seen her doing what I was seeing. So it was a couple of weeks before she was diagnosed, but she was diagnosed fairly young age with seizures. She has had both absence and tonic-clonic. Her medications that they gave her when she was a baby pretty much controlled the absence seizures. We've always had a few breakthrough tonic-clonic seizures from the time she was a baby. The first seizure I saw, I just had her on my chest. I was burping her. I had just fed her, and I felt her body tense up, and it was just a little twitch of the hand, and then she relaxed, and that was it. Just a couple of seconds. And my thought, that was weird. Like, I've never seen her do that before. I'd never seen a baby do that before. But then that started happening every night about that same time. But each time it got a little more. And so over the course of the next week, as I said, I was the only one that had seen this happen for a week. Each one was getting a little more obvious that there was an issue. And so she had also at the same time been, she would scream very badly for about 23 hours a day and would sleep for about an hour. So I was just pure exhaustion on our part. So I kind of even doubted myself and what I was seeing, since I was the only person that had seen it and was just completely exhausted. So finally, about a week later of me being the only person that had seen it, it happened 3 times within 15 minutes of my husband coming home from work. And by the time he came home, I was sobbing, and I told him, take us to the hospital. There's something wrong with one of us. Either I was losing my mind at that point, or, she was having seizures. Our oldest son, he is 3 years older than his sister. And so he was, of course, a little, but he was able to identify a seizure right away. But the crying really got to him. He hated seeing his baby sister being happy. And at that point, after months of it, we knew there's just nothing that we could do that would make her happy. But he would beg me, Mommy, do something, she's crying. And I said, there's just nothing I can do. I don't know what to do for her. And I didn't at that point know what was going to make that stop. I honestly thought this could go on forever. I mean, it really seemed like that would be the case, that she would always have that and cry. And I part of me thought, what did I do to our family that now, this is what we'll have to have forever. I mean, she's not happy. She started off on phenobarbital. She was 6 weeks old at that point, and she was on that for about 6 months. And during that 6 months, she continued to scream and not sleep, and except for about an hour a day, where she would finally settle down and sleep. And then at that point, the phenobarbital, like, they had to increase the doses, and it just wasn't doing a good job of controlling the seizures. So at that point, we switched to Keppra. And the very first day that she took the Keppra, she slept through the night. And she woke up the next day and smiled her very first smile. And that whole night I laid awake wondering why she wasn't up, what was wrong with her, but I didn't dare want to go in her room and disturb her. So I let her go, but I worried about her all night long because this was something that had never happened in her life. So we saw decent control with the Keppra, and eventually had to add other medications as time went on. She still takes the Keppra, and I am scared for the day that she would ever come off of that one, because it was a bit of a attitude adjustment. Whatever it was, it helped. I mean, obviously helped the other issues that she was having, made her more comfortable or something. I had always suspected perhaps she had had migraines or something at that point, because she would put her hands on her head and just pull at her hair and scream until she had started the Keppra. So she still takes that, but she's taken lots of different medicines, triliptal, Banzel. We've went through many. Each time the pattern seems to be the seizures get longer, they start getting more frequent. We up the dose, it drops it back down, and eventually we're maxed out on the dose and the seizures are ramping up again. So they've always kept her on the Keppra, but changed the other medications. So a couple of years ago, as the seizures started ramping up as a teenager, they decided to try to add a third medication. And at that point, we started seeing some side effects of that medication. And she was already maxed at the other two medicines that she was on. She wasn't sleeping well. She would be constantly awake, and she would start to fall down. We noticed a lot of falls. The school, she was having trouble falling down at school. She was falling down a lot at home. And it happened pretty quickly after we had upped the starter dose. They had the starter dose she went okay with. As soon as we upped the dose, we started noticing these different side effects. And you could just tell it wasn't her, and she was falling a lot on the new medication. When the third medication didn't work, or didn't really help to decrease the seizures, we were referred to an epileptologist, and he explained to us that for about 30% of people, medications or any combination of medications it just isn't going to control their seizures. While it's helped considerably, because I know she has that tendency to have multiple seizures, the medications helped. It hasn't stopped them at any point in her life. Any combination of medication has not. So at that point, they began to discuss possible options such as surgery, and initially told us that the diet for her would not be an option because she doesn't understand. And being as she goes to school with other kids, even if she got a hold of a potato chip or something at school, it would, ruin the diet for her. So they were not at that time suggesting that the diet was an option, and wanted to see about evaluating her for surgery. We went through the evaluation process, all the testing, and they got a hold of us and told us that, yes, they felt the surgery was recommended for her, but they did at that point say that as a group, they decided if we wanted to try the diet, that it wouldn't hurt for us to try it. My husband and I really felt that we needed to exhaust every option before we did something so drastic as a surgery that couldn't be undone. If we tried the diet and we needed to stop it, not a big deal, but a surgery was permanent. And the number of seizures that she was having, because we've seen them so long, although they had increased, I hear stories of people having 50 or 100 seizures a day. And I thought I could see perhaps them doing a surgery. That made sense to me. But for somebody that's having the seizure once a week, or maybe 2 or 3 times a day and once a week, it seemed extreme for the situation we were in. And I don't know if that is just like a numbness from, dealing with it for so many years, that it's just kind of become an everyday thing. Maybe I would feel differently about it if it was me personally having them. I'm not sure, but our thoughts were that it just seemed very drastic to jump right to the surgery. And we both felt that we needed to know in our hearts we had done everything. Even if the diet would be difficult, we needed to know we had done everything before we made the decision to have a surgery. So after speaking with the doctor, we said that, yes, we wanted to try it. And we met with a dietitian who explained the things that we would need to do. But even prior to meeting with the dietitian, some of Sierra's favorite foods were carbs, macaroni and cheese, cheese crackers, things like that. And we knew those things needed to go. So over the course of the couple months while we were waiting on the appointment with the dietitian, we let her finish her favorite foods in the house, but I didn't buy any more of them. And eventually, as we were going, we were trying to transition them over to things that we knew would be more acceptable. We didn't cut her completely off because we didn't really know what we were doing and we wanted to wait. But we started getting rid of the really high carb things and replacing them with things that we thought would be acceptable. And then after meeting with the dietitian, I felt pretty prepared, and we started the diet within a few days of meeting with the dietitian. We felt like we were ready to go. Within a few weeks of starting the diet, we noticed that there were changes in her seizure pattern. Not that we really had a reduction, and we may have even had a bit of an increase in her seizures, but I'd noticed that the typical pattern that we had always seen completely changed. Instead of her having seizures predominantly in the morning, it could happen at any time of day. So they may have gotten a little more frequent, but at the same time, they may have been a little, they may not have lasted as long, I think was the first sign that we noticed. So we definitely knew the diet was affecting her seizures, even though initially it wasn't affecting them necessarily in an overly positive manner. But we, at that point, were just not prepared to give up very easily. We wanted to stick it out and really see, because we knew that there was an effect. They had told us, it was a 50-50 shot that it would work for her in reducing her seizures. And when we seen that it was changing the seizures, we're holding out hope that we would be in that 50%. We had always heard that when about 6 months, give it a 6-month try, and that would be a good indication. But at the 6-month mark, we still really weren't seeing a reduction in seizures, although the length wasn't as long of the seizures. We kind of wanted to give it a few more months after the 6-month mark rolled around with not a lot of progress. It's like, let's stick it out a little longer and see what happens now that she's able to take the Keto V supplement. And so around, I think, month 7, we started seeing a reduction in seizures and definitely a change in the length of seizures. She would typically have seizures lasting a little over 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes in that time frame. And we would have seizures that lasted seconds. So maybe 15 seconds, 10 to 15 seconds. She didn't even fall down into a full tonic-clonic seizure. It would just be a pause, a grimace of her face, and then she'd walk away like nothing had happened. So we were definitely seeing an improvement there. And we began seeing a reduction in the amount of seizures. So at that point, we knew we wanted to continue on with the diet. At that point, she was doing 15 net carbs a day. And when the seizure control wasn't quite where we wanted it to be, I think around maybe the 9-month mark or so, they said, well, they didn't want to drop her all the way down to 10 carbs. They said, well, try 12 for a couple weeks and see if you can make it work on 12 net carbs a day, see what happens. They didn't want to leave her overly hungry, but try to drop it down a little bit, which we did. And there was a little bit of an improvement. And then this past May, so about 7-8 months ago, we had a really bad May for seizures. And so they said, well, let's go 10. So we went to 10 carbs a day, and they said more fat. I said, okay, I don't know how, but I'll get it in there. And so we added more fat, and we've seen very good seizure control since May. On the Facebook group that I'm in for the Modified Atkins Diet, some of them say, well, my kid's been on this for 2 weeks, for 3 weeks, and I'm not seeing any progress, or maybe I'm seeing an increase of seizures. What do I do? Do I quit? And I just want to tell these people, stick with it. I mean, it took 7 months for us to see any real positive progress. We see a change, but it took us months to see a positive change. And it did work. So, to stick with it, to give it a good solid try, because it's not going to hurt. I mean, it's not really hurting them to try the diet. So, give it a shot and stick with it when it gets hard, because, it was hard. And now it's easy. I mean, at first I thought, how are we going to do this on 15 carbs a day? And now she's on 10 carbs a day. And it's like, oh, we can splurge on some meal that's like 4 carbs because I know I've got dinner covered, things like that. And I just, want to tell people, you just give it a really good try and stick even when it's difficult, because, it may still work. It just may take a while to see real progress. Give it a try, because it's not going to hurt. I mean, it's as natural as you can get. I mean, we pump ourselves full of medications, and she's still on medications, but this is food. I mean, you can come up with healthy foods, healthy options for them, and it is certainly not going to really hurt to give it a try. I'm very glad that we went this route instead of jumping right to a surgery. She still has seizures, but is this controlling them enough and reducing them enough that we may not need to go through that surgery? And I think that we are seeing that it is helping enough that we can avoid a surgery and any possible complications that can come from that. So it's certainly worth giving the diet a try. It is hard, especially at first, but eventually you learn to live with it and adapt to it. And today, we could go anywhere. I wouldn't hesitate to, take her on vacation or whatever, knowing that we had the diet to contend with. It's just certain things that we would have to plan ahead of time. And I think that after 2 years on the diet, we've adapted well to those kind of challenges. And I'm glad of the place that we're at right now. And I really would encourage anybody to not hesitate. If you're considering it, find out more and give it a shot. And I know that, 18 years ago when this all started, I felt alone. I mean, there wasn't the information out there available and accessible to me. And there wasn't that support that I thought would have been helpful at the time. So I try to help out where I can and get whatever information out there that I can. And I've always felt, people, have asked me, not just with the diet, but on her disabilities in general, oh, I'm sorry, I probably shouldn't ask you this. And I was like, as long as somebody asks me a respectful question, I'm going to answer it, because, I feel it's my duty, and I'm very appreciative of the parents that came before me that were able to share and get I for my daughter's disabilities, I'm thinking years ago she would have been in an institution somewhere. And I'm so lucky for the parents that came before me and helped get that change to a standard. We live in the home, we go out in the community, we get, employment for these kids and adults. I'm so thankful for them. And so I love to help out and offer whatever information I can to do my part for the next few generations.